My mistress is pregnant with a boy. You're useless to me now, so get out. Ethan, whom I had once sworn eternal love with, announced loudly. At 32, I had been married to Ethan for 7 years, devoting myself to him body and soul. When Ethan was transferred to an unfamiliar place due to his company's orders, I quit my job. I loved to support him. I provided him with warm meals, a clean house even while continuing to work. I also endured the repeated pressures from his parents to see a grandchild, continuing with painful infertility treatments for over 5 years, both mentally and physically. Yet, as if mocking my efforts, Ethan had been having an affair with another woman in the shadows. Unbelievable. At the meeting discussing our divorce, Ethan and Madison, his mistress, retorted. Do you even know how old Madison is? 25, okay? Unlike you, she's young and doesn't have the financial means yet, so give her a break. But well, being young, her eggs must have been fresh. It took just a few tries, and she got pregnant right away, seriously efficiently. With that, Ethan said, and Madison, looking pleased, joined in on mocking me. That's right. Jealous of me getting pregnant so easily? Their attitude tore me apart. However, I couldn't back down now. Regardless of what you say, I'm pursuing alimony. I continued, calmly explaining the actions to be taken against him, with a lawyer present. As we talked, Madison's irritation became increasingly evident. Enough. I'm going to the bathroom, Madison said in a clearly sulked manner, suddenly standing up. At that moment. What's this? Looking at Madison's lower half, I was speechless. A mysterious liquid dripped and fell, staining her pure white dress. That's weird. Aren't you supposed to be pregnant? But there's blood? My name is Emily, I'm 32 years old. I work at a trading company in New York. I was 25 when I married Ethan, 3 years older than me. Ethan was a dynamic salesperson at a leading car manufacturer. From the moment we met, I was drawn to his interesting conversations and smart demeanor. Fortunately, Ethan took a liking to me as well. And our relationship quickly progressed to dating and then to marriage. Right after our marriage, Ethan was transferred to the countryside on company orders. Though it was the countryside, it was the biggest city in the area, convenient with trains and other amenities. And a place still expecting population inflow. Ethan was appointed to oversee several dealerships in that area. When he asked me to quit my job and follow him, I hesitated. At the time, I was working at a major publishing house. Having studied literature in college and dreamt of becoming an editor since high school, I was overjoyed when I got the editing job at the publishing house. However, I also wanted to support Ethan, who was moving to a new place by himself, and most importantly, I didn't want to be separated from him during the precious early years of our marriage. Becoming a mother was also one of my childhood dreams. At the time, Ethan's assignment was expected to last at least 5 years. If he went alone, he would return when I was 30. Back then, turning 30 seemed far off, and I wasn't confident about starting a family at that age. After much deliberation, I decided to quit my job at the publishing house and follow Ethan on his assignment. That's great. If Emily is with me, I'll feel at ease. Focus on the household for a while and support my life. It's stressful adapting to a new environment, he told me, so I decided not to look for work at the new location and focus solely on our home and trying to conceive. But conceiving a child proved difficult. Out of desperation, one night I tentatively suggested to Ethan, maybe we should start considering infertility treatments. He glanced at me briefly and said sharply, sure, you can undergo treatment, but use your own savings for it. His words shocked me. But it couldn't be helped. In the end, I decided to use the savings I had accumulated from my days working at a publishing house before marriage, bit by bit, to attend a clinic for infertility treatment. Ethan's cooperation was crucial for the treatment. However, no matter how many times I explained it to him, he just didn't get it. Why do I have to schedule our intimate moments around some doctor's orders? If there's real love, shouldn't we naturally conceive at the right time? It must be because there's something wrong with Emily, that's why we can't do what normal couples do. Having followed him to a region where I had no friends, these words from my supposedly trustworthy husband ate away at my heart. Looks like my period came again this month. Seriously, why can all of our friends' wives get pregnant and not Emily? You've been so uptight lately, it's been bothering me. Maybe you should try focusing on something else? Following Ethan's suggestion, I gave up focusing solely on our household and went back to work. My return to the workforce was as a part-time administrative assistant at a local small business, where my days were filled with making coffee and copying documents over and over. The company was mostly older people with surprisingly immature personalities, quickly resorting to gossip whenever someone stepped away. That was the environment. Right after joining, I wished I could get pregnant quickly and leave such a company. But after pleading with Ethan and somehow getting his cooperation, we continued trying artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization, but nothing changed, and I couldn't get pregnant. All the effort for the treatments turned out to be in vain, and 5 years into our marriage, at the age of 30, I still hadn't had a child. Emily, huh? I thought you were lucky to get a young and healthy wife, but now you're 30 already. Even though more women are having children later, wasn't getting married at 25 and taking it easy a bit too laid back? With Ethan's earnings, you haven't been doing much more than a casual job. With so much free time, why can't you show us even one grandchild? We're working full-time after all. Every time we visited Ethan's parents, who were still in the prime of their working lives in their 50s and both high school teachers, went beyond mere insinuations to outright criticism for not being able to have children. They had a strong belief in continuing to work after having children as the mark of a responsible adult, so they couldn't understand why I, doing light part-time work, couldn't get pregnant. However, Ethan never said anything in my defense, leading to fights on our way back from his parents' house every time. We might be beyond saving. That was what I started to think a year ago, at 31, when Ethan was finally set to return to New York after a slightly delayed schedule. Emily, I got a promotion. It's all thanks to you supporting me in unfamiliar territory for the last 6 years. Ethan, that's great. I'll cook something special to celebrate. It was a glimmer of hope in our home, which had been overshadowed by gloom for a long time. From that day on, it was as if all the past troubles were a lie. We started talking more, the number of meals we shared at home and dates on weekends increased, and our intimate life, which had been on hold for a while, resumed. Wow, what a gorgeous condo! Are we going to live here? Of course. You've been through a lot, Emily, so I got us a nice place in New York. Even though I couldn't return to the publishing house I used to work for, I started a new job at a trading company in New York. Alongside simple administrative tasks, I was entrusted with work like the company newsletter. The people around me were great, and I was able to work with more peace of mind than before. Ethan, having been promoted, seemed to have a bit more free time and became more supportive of our efforts to conceive. Maybe, just maybe, we could get pregnant soon. But about 6 months ago, I started to feel like there was something off about my husband's behavior. Despite saying that he was delegating more work to his subordinates and reducing his overtime, suddenly, his late-night taxi rides home and weekend-long business trips increased. Then one day. Hey, Emily. Have you noticed anything different about Ethan lately? Because, a while back, Ethan came into this store holding hands with a young girl. I heard such a thing from the manager who runs a small supermarket near the next station. I haven't told Ethan, but I sometimes shop at this supermarket for fresh produce because they have a wide selection and it's easy to find seasonal fruits. Her words were hard to believe, but considering my husband's recent behavior, it wasn't impossible. When I got home, I decided to snoop around Ethan's study. And then, what's this? In his desk, boldly placed, was a diary with photos tucked inside. They were a couple shots with a young woman. 2 photos of them cheek to cheek, and one of the woman kissing Ethan's cheek. I could feel the warmth draining from my hands. While my fingertips grew colder, my heart was pounding. After 7 years of marriage, I couldn't come to terms with my husband's betrayal.
Ethan, what's this photo about?
That night, as soon as Ethan came home, I immediately confronted him with the truth. Seeing the photos I presented, Ethan's eyes widened for a moment, but then he started grinning and said, "Oh, caught me, huh?" And then he said something unbelievable. "My mistress is pregnant with a boy. You're useless to me now, so get out."
What are you talking about? What do you mean?
Just what I said. Get out. You're of no use to me since you can't get pregnant. Shocked by his attitude and words, I was devastated. Not only was the affair shocking, but the fact that he got her pregnant was even more so. And then, his words mocking all the efforts I had made. Why could someone who had an immoral relationship with my husband get pregnant so easily when I, who had tried for years, could not? These thoughts swirled in my head as I packed my things, crying. Unforgivable. More than the sadness of being betrayed by the husband I loved, the desire to absolutely punish my husband and his mistress grew within me. From that day, I began preparing for divorce. 7 months later. I really wanted to have a conversation with Ethan immediately, but it was constantly put off or he would snap at me whenever I tried to bring it up, so it never happened. After a few months, I moved out and stayed at my parents' house. I decided to involve a lawyer and discuss the divorce. Today, I would like to discuss the divorce between Ethan and Emily. The female lawyer my father recommended was very supportive and quickly set up a meeting with Ethan. It was unexpected that Madison, his mistress, would come too. The meeting, which started at 10 a.m. on a Saturday at a restaurant, was attended by Madison, who arrived late. I was thinking about getting a proper divorce from Ethan and claiming alimony from Ethan, but I really didn't want to see the face of the woman who got pregnant from the affair, so I honestly didn't want her to come. So, I even thought, I wish she wouldn't come at all, but she arrived at the diner 20 minutes late. Sorry, you know. Being pregnant really slows down my prep time. Indeed. Her belly was showing. 8 months, maybe even close to full term. I think I'll have the pancakes and the sandwich. Madison ordered a large amount of food. It seemed like she might have pregnancy-induced hunger. But judging by the size of her belly, the morning sickness phase should be over. Now that everyone's here, I'd like to move on to the topic of alimony that Emily wishes. The lawyer began, and Madison exaggeratedly gasped. You're claiming alimony? At a time when I'll soon need to spend more and more on the child? Are you serious? Just because you couldn't get pregnant for years, you're taking it out on me, who got pregnant so easily. I was stunned by her audacious level of remarks. But Ethan next to her was syncing up with her. Drop the alimony, will you? You know Madison's age, right? 25 years old? Unlike you, she's young and doesn't have much in the way of financial power, so give her a break. But yeah, being young, her eggs must have been fresh. Got pregnant pretty quickly after a few times, really efficiently. That was something to be thankful for, though. The outrageous comments nearly made me dizzy. Throughout, as the lawyer and I tried to steer the conversation, Ethan and Madison kept up this tone, getting us nowhere. Eventually, Madison, possibly frustrated, exclaimed, "Enough. I'm going to the bathroom," and suddenly stood up. That moment.
Hey, is that blood?
I stared at Madison's lower half as she stood up. There was something that looked unmistakably like blood on the thigh area of her white dress. But she was supposed to be pregnant, which meant she shouldn't be having her period. Moreover, besides the blood, a liquid resembling water was dripping in large amounts, indicating that something was wrong.
What does this mean? What's this?
Madison immediately panicked. The sight of blood suggested that something might have happened to the baby in her womb. Ethan, too, was flustered, asking, "Madison, are you okay?" What was supposed to be a meeting for discussion ended with the lawyer and I hurriedly calling 911 and pushing Madison and my husband into an ambulance. I couldn't help but feel despondent, wondering why I, the victim, was helping the other woman. I returned to my parents' house, where I was staying. The next morning, a Sunday, as I was having breakfast with my family, the doorbell rang repeatedly.
Emily, good morning.
Oh, sorry for intruding. Or should I say, I'm home. As my parents stood there stunned at the entrance, Ethan confidently walked into the living room.
You're gonna find this hilarious, but it turns out Madison's pregnancy was a lie.
Ethan began, chuckling. Madison and Ethan had met a few months after he started working in New York. She was working at a cabaret club frequently visited by Ethan. Claiming to resemble a certain plus-size charisma model, Madison was a bit on the plump side but had glowing white skin and big, appealing eyes, which made her fairly popular at the club. One night, after a company dinner, Madison leaned on Ethan. Caught up in the thrill of his recent promotion to New York, Ethan was smitten by her soft skin and plump lips, and ended up inviting her to a hotel. That's how it all started. Then, one particular night, Madison, usually so lively, seemed sick and kept rushing to the bathroom to vomit.
Madison, could you be pregnant?
She didn't answer at the time. But a few days later, she confessed that a pregnancy test had come back positive. Ethan was ecstatic. His return to New York had brought him closer to his parents again, and the pressure to show them a grandchild had increased. If we're having a child, let's marry Madison. My parents would be thrilled. He thought, getting ahead of himself. When it was later revealed that the baby was supposedly a boy, this misunderstanding only added fuel to Ethan's delusional enthusiasm. But in reality, Madison was not pregnant. At 25, she was planning her exit from nightlife. After overeating and vomiting one night she spent with Ethan, he mistakenly thought she was pregnant, and she saw it as an opportunity to leverage for marriage. Being a food lover, she began to eat more, pretending to be pregnant while gradually gaining weight. The incontinence she experienced the day before was due to obesity putting pressure on her bladder, leading to stress incontinence. The bleeding turned out to be her period. Man, she was a real piece of work.
I was so worried she had miscarried, but to think she wasn't even pregnant.
Of course, I've completely broken things off with her. Ethan demeaned Madison. Holding my hand, he started, I messed up this time. Emily, let's keep working on infertility treatment together. We're husband and wife. Let's cancel the divorce. His words felt oddly distant, as if spoken from afar. Why had I been enduring the hardship of infertility treatments for a child with such a man? I couldn't help but laugh, feeling like a fool for everything up until now, my anger giving way to ridicule.
Emily, thank you. You'll give us another chance, right?
Seeing me laugh, Ethan mistakenly thought I had accepted his plea to retract the divorce. He moved to hug me, overwhelmed with emotion. Of course, I had no desire to be touched by such a filthy man, so I firmly pushed his hand away.
I've endured years of ridicule and suffering from you and your parents, all the while dreaming of having your child and bearing the painful infertility treatments. Can you even imagine the excruciating pain of hysterosalping? Begging you, I used my savings for numerous artificial inseminations. Every time it failed, do you have any idea how I felt? You'll never understand, nor do you even bother to try. To think I would start over with someone like you is unimaginable.
Crying out, I told my parents, who were looking on worriedly from the door, please, get him out of here.
Emily, wait. Just wait a minute. Listen to me.
Ethan was dragged out of my parents' house by my parents, and my brother and sister who lived nearby and had come over, worried about me. But since that day, Ethan has been repeatedly storming my parents' house, insisting we're not getting a divorce. Despite me saying, I won't talk unless it's through a lawyer, he wouldn't listen and would sit in front of the house from early in the morning during weekends. It wasn't just at my parents' house. He would also ambush me in front of the company I worked for, waiting for me every day after work.
Hey, Emily. Forgive me, please.
He would chant like a curse, and even when Ethan wasn't around, the phrase would echo in my mind, wearing me down mentally. After much thought, I decided to contact someone.
I never thought you'd reach out to me, especially since you hardly wanted to speak to us unless it was through Ethan, especially in the latter part of your marriage.
My mother-in-law said, her words dripping with sarcasm as usual when we met after a long time. However, I felt she was much more reasonable than Ethan. Yes, I had decided to tell Ethan's parents everything. I was betting that Ethan, with his pride, hadn't told his parents the real story. I thought I got my mistress pregnant and asked my wife for a divorce, but the pregnancy was a lie, so now I'm trying to cancel the divorce. As expected, the news was a shock to my in-laws. Initially, they listened with furrowed brows, but gradually, their expressions brightened. So, Emily, you're fed up with Ethan and want a divorce. It's unfortunate, but honestly, it might not be bad news for us, my mother-in-law said. Right.
This might sound wrong, but Ethan's affair was with a 25-year-old, right? We might actually prefer her over Emily, who has had trouble conceiving.
They openly dismissed Madison's lies and inflated their hopes without my input. Despite my dismay at their reaction, I thought, if they were willing to act on it, I wouldn't complain.
Leave it to us.
We'll talk to Ethan. They promised, sending me off with an unprecedentedly bright smile and even a box of sweets. A few days later, Ethan called in a panic.
What's the meaning of this, Emily?
Despite my insistence on communicating through a lawyer, it was frustrating how he kept trying to contact me directly. But this was all for a smooth divorce. I tried to remain calm on the phone.
Mom and Dad suddenly started saying I should divorce you, even though they were pressuring you to have kids before. What's with this turnaround? It's crazy.
It sounded like Ethan was at his parents' house. After a while, I heard some noises, and the voice on the phone changed. Sorry, Emily.
It seems like he's quite distressed and can't make rational decisions right now. We've been trying to talk to him, but we think he'd understand if you could also talk. He's been saying he hasn't been able to talk to you recently. Could you come here now? We've prepared the divorce papers. All that's left is for you both to sign. Really?
Thank you.
I'm on my way.
I rushed into a taxi. According to my mother-in-law during our call, Ethan was distraught, but persuasion was close. They had threatened to leave all their inheritance to Ethan's brother if he didn't divorce me and remarry Madison. This seemed to have an effect. When I arrived, Ethan had a defeated look and had already filled out the divorce papers but hesitated at the final signature. Without taking off my jacket, I confronted him. Hey, Ethan. I truly hate you now. His shoulders twitched at my words. He turned slowly with that cold expression I'd seen several times during our marriage. I hate it too.
A defective woman like you who can't get pregnant.
He retorted bitterly and forcefully stamped the paper. I silently took the divorce papers and left their house. I submitted the divorce papers to the office. Later on, during a meeting with Ethan, Madison, and my lawyer to reset the conversation, I reiterated my demand for compensation from him.
Unbelievable. I should be the one asking for damages for wasting my time with a woman like you. Compensation is impossible. I'm also suffering mental anguish from all this stress. I want compensation.
They both shrieked. The lawyer, exasperated, sighed and informed them that if they refused to pay compensation, we would proceed with legal action. The word court seemed to sober them up. They promised to pay the demanded compensation quickly and to cease all contact with me. We also prepared a document for any future issues. Reluctantly, perhaps due to their dread of legal action, he transferred the compensation by the specified deadline. Checking the transfer on my phone, I finally felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Having overstayed my welcome at my parents' house, I decided to move and start anew. Changing jobs as the seasons changed and signs of spring appeared. I was relieved to be starting my new life in peace. Even though I occasionally received unsettling reconciliation attempts from Ethan. No matter how many times I blocked him, he would always contact me from a new account. It seemed that merely blocking him wasn't enough. I needed to change my phone and all my contact information. Though the thought of transferring all my data was daunting and I had been hesitant, I decided it was time for a new phone. I forwarded all of Ethan's emails to all our mutual acquaintances, making sure they knew not to give Ethan my new contact information under any circumstances. Later, I found out that some of Ethan's coworkers were among the recipients, which meant the story had spread to Ethan's company as well. Although the company knew we had divorced, finding out he was sending bizarre emails to his ex-wife turned him into a bit of a laughingstock. Eventually, Ethan felt uncomfortable at the prestigious company he always bragged about and resigned. About half a year into my new life.
Hey, Emily!
I suddenly got a call from my mother-in-law. Although I had blocked Ethan's number in every way possible, I had given my new contact details to my mother-in-law just in case Ethan harassed me again, so we could communicate if necessary. However, this was the first time she actually called. Sobbing on the other end, she told me that Ethan had quickly remarried Madison after our divorce. Just as her parents had planned. But after becoming uncomfortable at his company and resigning, Ethan ended up living at his parents' house, essentially becoming an unemployed. Madison, who had previously worked in nightlife, had quit her job around the time she began pretending to be pregnant with Ethan's child and had not worked since, relying on Ethan for support. Now, both of them were jobless and living at Ethan's parents' house, significantly increasing the parents' burden. Even if a grandchild was born, they couldn't possibly take care of it under these circumstances. Months passed with neither Ethan nor Madison looking for work, prompting Ethan's parents to try to kick them out. About a month ago, however, it turned out Madison was actually pregnant.
Well, isn't that what you wanted? Everything worked out as you planned.
I responded nonchalantly, switching the call to speakerphone and sipping my tea. My mother-in-law exclaimed, "It's terrible." Madison, it seems, spent her days doing nothing but playing on her phone. Being pregnant, she couldn't do much heavy housework, which was understandable. But she began refusing even the small tasks she used to do, reacting hysterically if even gently reproached. Ethan, claiming he needed to support Madison, refused to look for full-time work. Contrary to his pride in having worked for a leading company. Now, he was only willing to work part-time jobs. Ethan's parents, both still working full-time as teachers, had hoped to enjoy their retirement but were now exhausted from taking care of two grown, unemployed children.
I feel calmer after talking to you, Emily. I feel guilty for what we put you through. It's my responsibility to deal with the consequences of my actions.
My mother-in-law said after calming down, thanking me before hanging up. That was the last I heard from her. A year after my divorce from Ethan, I was living peacefully in a new place, healing from the wounds of infidelity and divorce. I had restarted my career in publishing, working for a smaller company but leading a fulfilling life. One day, I received a letter from the lawyer who had helped me a year ago, along with a note saying, "This arrived at our office for you." It was a letter from my mother-in-law, without a return address. The letter detailed how Ethan, Madison, and my former in-laws were currently living. Apparently, my former in-laws no longer lived in that house. After our phone conversation, my mother-in-law finally decided to evict Ethan and Madison. She took back the keys, barricaded the windows from inside, making sure they couldn't enter. As expected, they didn't take it quietly.
Mom! Are you really abandoning me? Leaving a pregnant woman out in the cold, what if something happens to the baby? You're cursed.
Naturally, their ruckus at the front door drew disdainful looks from the neighbors and even led to a noise complaint to the police. At their wits' end, my in-laws decided to sell the cherished family home they had boasted of preserving for generations and physically cut ties, fleeing to a distant location. From the expressions like "the air is fresher here" and "we're growing vegetables" in the letter, it seems they're living in the countryside now. Though they've cut ties with Ethan and Madison, they've heard about them through Ethan's younger brother. Left by his parents and without income, Ethan reluctantly rented a nearby place and took a full-time sales job at a small but historic company that supplies screws to major corporations. But Ethan, who once thrived as a salesperson at a renowned car manufacturer, had no motivation for a job he deemed beneath him, selling mere screws, and his attitude caused problems at work. Madison, who safely gave birth, neglects both child-rearing and housekeeping, always on her phone, leading to a dirty home and constant fights. One day, she vanished with all of Ethan's savings, leaving behind only a signed divorce paper. The letter from my mother-in-law ended with an apology, expressing regret for the trouble they caused me and hoping I find happiness without any further involvement with Ethan. Although I had difficulties with her during my marriage, reading her words felt slightly vindicating. Friends occasionally tell me Ethan is seeking reconciliation, but fortunately, his reputation precedes him, and nobody in my circle has divulged my whereabouts, allowing me to live in peace. As I finished reading my mother-in-law's letter, I felt a resolve to cherish and move forward with my new life, grateful for the peace I've found.